There's a product that's literally called Brix, and it's very common in Germany. This is something that's been put on that's intentionally designed to look like trichomes when you look under the microscope.
Lots is being said about the quality of cannabis around the globe, the level of THC or the lack of CBD for more medicinal use.
If I go to buy anything in which I'm consuming, they've had to go through so much rigorous standards, which is something which is missing right now from even the coffee shops.
Also, cannabis is often polluted with pesticides and other materials to increase the weight. Cannabis News Network is introducing the CannaTest, a test which shows what compounds are present in the plant. Reporters from all over Europe will score weed to be tested in one testing facility. The goal is to record the state of cannabis available. We scored 5 samples to be tested. 1 from Vienna, 1 from Valencia, and 3 samples from Berlin. The Görlitzer Park came to public attention because it's one of the hotspots in Berlin to buy weed. But locals complained about the nuisance of dealers and getting asked if they wanted to buy drugs as well. Since the 1st of April, the possession of minor amounts is prosecuted in the park and dealers have moved to the surrounding streets. But there are still some in the park.
Okay.
Our next stop is called Raugelände, which is the centre of party culture with a lot of bars and clubs nearby.
Kann man denn hier was kaufen?
We had to ask a few passers-by but found a dealer just outside quite easily. For our last sample, we went to a private collection who, of course, does not want to be shown. In total, we acquired 3 samples, each about 3 to 4 grams for €30. The cannabis is examined under a microscope to see if there are any pesticides or other harmful ingredients.
This would appear to be relatively okay because we see lots of heads. The thing that concerns me though when I look at these is that there's no body to them. It's a bunch of heads all over. So you see we have a bunch of heads but they're not on any stem. There's just like a ball. There's a product that's literally called Brix and it's very common in Germany, and what they do is they spray on it to make it look like resin. So for me, the biggest issue with this is that I see all these balls everywhere but no stems. And then when I look at that area like this, and I can clearly see that these are not resin glands, but they have the same structure as the other part, it leads me to believe that this is not just a residual pesticide that's left over. This is something that's been put on that's intentionally designed to look like trichomes when you look under the microscope. This looks all right, to be honest. There's still some issues. There's no heads. We see here this sort of clump all over the resin. Now, much like the first sample, it's more rounded and it looks more like some goo, you know, as if it was liquidy and it's covering several resin glands. Now, the first one that we got from Germany, the difference is that the residue was sharper. It looked almost like actual crystals, lots and lots of salt. It could be Brix, it could also just be salt water. Sometimes they use sugar water and salt water to cover the weed, and then when it dries, it leaves crystals. The thing that concerns me instantly when I look at it, first of all, I don't see any heads. I see lots of stalks, but no round heads. All of the resin glands looks very rough. It looks quite powdery from a distance, you know? Resin should look very smooth. But this all looks very powdery and jaggedy. And when I zoom in close, this patch here is definitely not a resin gland. It seems like something is on top of the resin gland contaminating it. Once again, this is just residual pesticides. There's a nice big blob there in the middle of the screen. And that's definitely not meant to be there.
In Spanish Valencia, we visit its traditional festival of Las Fallas, the fires. The main object of the festival is the creation and destruction of ninots, puppets or dolls. But that is all that is burning. Although alcohol gushes, cannabis is not allowed. The Spanish team of Cannabis News Network wanted to see how easy it is to buy marijuana on the black market.
¿Sabes dónde puedo encontrar hierba?
Sí, si te esperas un momentito, sí.
Vamos a un sitio más tranquilos, que ya verás qué buena hierba tengo aquí, como está lleno de policía, que estamos en fallas. Ahora hay que buscar un sitio jodido. Tengo de 2 clases, ¿eh? Mira, huele. Si quieres coca, también hay coca, ¿eh? Y pastillas y éxtasis.
No, gracias.
Again, it shows that you can buy everything from the streets. There is no difference between harder drugs, such as cocaine and heroin, and cannabis.
¿En la papelera las tienes escondidas?
Claro que sí, es el mejor escondite. Mira,
¿Y de dónde la consigues?
esta es la planta de un amigo mío y pone todo orgánico. Nada de químicos ni...
Importante.
We bought one sample and paid €30 for 4 grams.
This one looks quite nice. I mean, the first thing we can see is intact resin glands. Yeah, we had no heads on the last sample, whereas this one, if we zoom out, I mean, these ones are actually just nice, individual. You see balls, you see heads. I don't see major contaminant issues. They're more better shaped. There's definitely not as much pesticide on here. In fact, none at all from what I can see. This is overall some okay weed.
In Vienna, you can buy cannabis as a plant, but you cannot use it. To get some weed to smoke, as a foreigner, is pretty hard.
I want to score some grass, some weed. I don't know.
But it's illegal.
If you asked me, I think 3 years ago, maybe I could tell you something,
Okay.
but now I have no...
We started in the Vienna Westbahnhof. The atmosphere was dodgy.
How many? Just for 20 euros or something. Okay. You go on, Joseph.
You have to go
Where to?
2 stations with you 3 and then 5 minutes.
No, I'm not going much further than here. Oh, Westbahnhof. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Just near
Outside the metro.
Outside the Bahnhof,
Yeah.
behind the kebab.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I'm trying to find some weed.
Was zum Rauchen braucht er.
Yeah. For about 20 euros or something.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
Eventually, we were able to buy everything again. Surrounded by heroin and coke junks, we bought 2 grams of weed for €20.
I can already see some contaminants on here. We see a lot of squares and globs, which when I zoom in, are definitely not gonna look like the mushroom-shaped resin gland. Ooh, that's a very nasty one there. So you see that patch right there on the bottom left? How it's just like a giant glob that takes over half the screen? That shouldn't be there, and that is definitely some residual pesticide. This is really quite bad.
So, we scored 5 samples to be tested. We can conclude that the samples from the parks in Berlin and Vienna were the worst.
The quality of number 1, well, first of all, it came like all in crumbs. It was all powdery. It was squished into a little bag. While the THC percentage was one of the highest of them, it was easily one of the poorest in terms of contaminants, in terms of bud structure and appearance and smell. This one I would be quite disappointed with, in fact, if I were to have to buy this.
The one from Valencia and a private address in Berlin were the best.
It was actually quite rare for us in all of the samples to see a full resin gland. So this sort of stalk and head, that's what we want to see when we look at weed, and we want to see it everywhere. Secondly, it had the best cannabinoid spectrum. I mean, what we see there's a high amount of THC, but also you carry a little bit of THCV and some other ones. With that, having a more complete spectrum of cannabinoids will provide for a little bit nicer effect overall. It's not just going to be about the high of the THC, and it blends together some of the other ones.
What we also see is that the percentage of THC is quite high, 20%. If you're not an experienced smoker, it will do your head in. Stay tuned to Cannabis News Network.
Your source of cannabis news. Cannabis News Network.